Earlier this week, President Obama announced a historic shift in U.S. relations with Cuba, but how that will actually play out remains to be seen. Smoothing over a half-century of angst between America and Cuba has American farmers salivating at the chance to sell fruits and vegetables to the island nation. And that is just one possible revenue stream opened up by new trade relations with Cuba. But on Capitol Hill, one key Republican is hitting the road, slamming President Obama's plan. Senator Marco Rubio went to Miami to speak in front of a large crowd of Cuban Americans.
In the words of Raul Castro, Cuba has agreed to nothing. As he said yesterday in his address to the Cuban people, he said that they were able to get all these concessions without having to give up on any of their principles. And their principles are dictatorship, repression, jailing of your opponents, and exiling the rest. By his own admission, he's given up absolutely nothing. This is the kind of deal you get when you send your speechwriter to negotiate with a tyrant.
Another Republican, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, says he thought it was a good idea, and his comments reflect a softening in American feelings toward Cuba. In September, 56% told the New York Times that they favored reestablishing diplomatic relations with Cuba, compared to just 40% in 1998. Many critics see the end of an embargo as an unfair reward for an oppressive regime, and Marco Rubio is not the only one. Democrat Senator Bob Menendez says Obama's offer to the Castros just vindicates their brutal behavior. We are seeing a massive divide between politicians on both sides of the aisle. Massachusetts Congressman Jim McGovern played a critical role in smoothing out relations with Raul Castro. McGovern says critics are seeing it all wrong. The Worcester Democrat says reopening the doors to Cuba is the right approach. McGovern has pushed for a large change for diplomacy with Cuba since his first visit as a student back in 1979.
A sad day in the Australian city of Cairns this week after 8 children were found dead. The children between the ages of 18 months and 15 years were found in a suburban home after police were called. A woman was found with severe injuries along with the children, but is currently not being considered a suspect. She's the mother of 7 of the 8 children found. Police have yet to announce any formal suspects on the case, but say the woman is helping police with their investigation. This tragedy comes only days after the hostage situation in Sydney, leaving 3 people dead. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott says these are trying days for our country. There will be tears and prayers across our country for these children. Frustration in Ukraine after 5 more Ukrainian soldiers were killed this week. The past few weeks, a decline in attacks between Ukraine and pro-Russian separatists have given hope to ending the crisis. This did not last long enough, as the last 24 hours has brought violence in the area. Russian pro-separatists and Ukraine signed a ceasefire agreement back in September, but this has not stopped the attacks. Both sides argue that they are the victims of each other's violence and that they are following the agreement. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko says that a new round of peace talks, including Russia, are being decided on this week. As peace talks with Ukraine get decided on this week, Russian leader President Putin had just finished up his end-of-the-year conference by reassuring future financial stability. Putin spoke about the financial crisis, saying that it may take over 2 years to recover from the EU economic sanctions. He went on to blame Russia's economic problems on external factors and put the blame for Ukraine on the West. Since Putin's conference, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini reached out to Putin. He is asking for a change in Putin's attitude and wants Putin to become more cooperative. Putin has refused to announce an economic crisis as the ruble dropped 45% against the dollar just this year.
Well, we're starting to learn more about the origin of the Sony cyber attack. U.S. officials now say they believe North Korea is directly linked to the attack, despite that country's denying any involvement. Evidence shows hackers directed by North Korea's cyber unit used aggressive software wiping malware to steal Sony's corporate secrets and then erase the company's computer files. Investigators found similarities between the Sony attack and a damaging 2013 cyber attack on South Korean banks and broadcasters. Sources say the digital fingerprints in both of those cases have been traced back to the north. The attack is believed to be a response to a new film, The Interview. It's a comedy showing an assassination attempt against North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. A wake-up call for the federal government. A new survey from the Government Accountability Office, the GAO. It says that the feds are not prepared to deal with a natural disaster or worse, a terrorist attack. The bipartisan agency finds that FEMA lacks effective coordination and tracking of disaster efforts, especially in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy. It could be up to 5 years before FEMA figures things out. The report says they need more emergency shelters, extra medical gear, and treatment procedures to prevent future catastrophes. This is the first of several reports on disaster readiness that the GAO will release in the coming months.